Chandeliers of the Biltmore estate glimmered like 1,000 watching eyes as the Charleston elite toasted to their own generosity. Waiters moved quietly through the golden light, silver trays trembling with champagne flutes. Among them was Lucia Alvarez, 27, her dark hair tied neatly beneath a simple bun, her accent soft but unmistakably Argentine. She had worked double shifts for months, sending every spare dollar back home to Buenos Aires for her grandmother and 2 younger siblings. Then came the voice that sliced through the music. "Dance this tango with me," said Ethan Cole, the tech mogul whose fortune built half the skyline. "Impress me, and I'll donate $100,000 to this little charity. Make me fall in love, and I'll marry you on the spot." Laughter burst across the ballroom like a cruel wave. Lucia froze, the tray in her hands trembling. Heat flushed her cheeks, but her eyes, deep and steady, lifted toward him. Ethan leaned back in his chair, confident, amused, surrounded by friends who encouraged his mockery. The irony was unbearable. A fundraiser for underprivileged youth, hosted by a man humiliating a working woman for sport. Lucia felt the sting of every chuckle around her. For a heartbeat. She considered walking away. Her job was precious. Her family depended on it. But something older and fiercer stirred inside her, something that refused to bow to cruelty dressed as charm. She set the tray on the nearest table, the glassware clinking like distant applause. The room hushed. Ethan raised an eyebrow, expecting tears. Instead, Lucia's voice came clear and even. "All right, Mr. Cole," she said, "but if we dance, I choose the music." A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. The game had just changed. The laughter had not yet faded when silence fell again. It was the kind of silence that cuts deeper than noise. Lucia Alvarez stood in the center of that glittering ballroom, her uniform suddenly feeling heavier than the silver tray she had set aside. Hundreds of eyes locked on her, waiting for her to shrink back, to apologize, to disappear like every servant before her who dared to speak above her station. But she didn't. Something inside her had snapped, not in rage, but in defiance. Months of humiliation, of being treated as invisible, of hearing whispers that people like her were lucky to serve people like them, had hardened into a quiet flame that no fear could extinguish. She straightened her shoulders. The air in the Biltmore estate grew still enough to hear the ice melt in the untouched glasses. Ethan Cole lounged back in his chair, still smiling, convinced this was another amusing anecdote to entertain his circle of investors and admirers. He twirled the stem of his champagne glass and said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, "What's the matter, sweetheart? You do know what a tango is, don't you?" Lucia met his gaze, her dark eyes unwavering. Her accent thickened slightly as she replied, "I know it very well. Mr. Cole, the question is, do you?" A few guests gasped quietly. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh, she's going to lose her job." Another chuckled nervously. "This is going to be good." Lucia could feel her heartbeat pounding in her throat, but she refused to lower her eyes. She had cleaned the shoes of men like Ethan Cole, carried their plates, smiled when they ignored her existence. Yet deep down, she had always known she was more than what the uniform made her appear to be. The irony of the evening burned her chest. A charity gala for disadvantaged youth, hosted by a man who used a poor immigrant as his entertainment. How quickly the rich forgot the purpose of their generosity when it became a stage for vanity. Lucia inhaled slowly, feeling the heat of 1,000 stares pressing on her, and then she spoke, clear and calm, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "All right, Mr. Cole," she said. "If we dance, I'll choose the music." It was not loud, but it struck like a whip. Every whisper died. The string quartet stopped mid-note. The laughter evaporated into something sharper, something that tasted like disbelief. The only sound left was the steady hum of the chandelier bulbs. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. His friends exchanged uneasy glances. "Oh, she's serious," one of them muttered. Lucia took a single step forward, the click of her shoe echoing in the vast room. Her eyes never left his. Inside, her fear screamed for her to stop, to apologize, to walk away before she lost everything. But another voice rose stronger, the voice of her grandmother who had raised her to never bow to cruelty. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Alvarez," Ethan said finally, his grin returning, thinner this time. "Maybe," she replied softly, "but so are you." Her tone was steady, her spine straight, her expression unreadable. The room pulsed with a strange anticipation. Nobody was laughing anymore. Lucia felt her pulse slow, her nerves turn into steel. For the first time since she'd left Buenos Aires, she wasn't just surviving. She was standing for something that couldn't be bought, bargained, or belittled. Ethan leaned forward, curiosity replacing arrogance. "Then by all means," he said, gesturing to the band, "show us." Lucia turned slightly, scanning the small ensemble in the corner, her mind already reaching back to melodies she hadn't touched in years. The moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, terrifying yet liberating. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "I will," she said quietly, and as she walked toward the musicians, every head followed her in silence. No one knew it yet, but the game Ethan Cole had started for his own amusement was about to rewrite both their lives. Every eye followed Lucia Alvarez as she walked across the marble floor toward the small band in the corner. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the ballroom, sharp and deliberate, each step defying the weight of expectation pressing down on her. The musicians looked up, startled. No one spoke. The audience, once laughing, now watched in uneasy fascination. Lucia leaned toward the violinist, her voice low but firm. "Play Libertango," she whispered. The man blinked, uncertain, glancing toward the wealthy guests for approval. She held his gaze until he nodded. The cellist adjusted his bow. The pianist shifted on the bench, and the first haunting notes began to drift through the air like smoke. The moment the melody touched her, something ancient stirred inside Lucia. She reached behind her back, untied the apron strings, and let the white cloth fall to the floor. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Then she slipped off the black serving jacket, revealing a simple black dress beneath, elegant in its understatement. The transformation was quiet but electric. Her hands moved to the pins holding her hair, and with one small twist, the bun collapsed. A waterfall of chestnut curls tumbled down her shoulders. The soft lighting caught strands of bronze in her hair, the same shade as the city sunsets of Buenos Aires. She lifted her chin slightly, her expression no longer that of a waitress, but of a performer stepping back into her rightful place beneath the spotlight. Lucia had not danced publicly in years. The last time had been at the Teatro Nacional when she was 19, her parents still alive, her future burning bright. They had been her greatest supporters, sitting in the front row, her mother whispering the rhythm under her breath, while her father applauded every step. Then came the accident, a drunk driver, a midnight phone call, the kind of tragedy that leaves no words, only silence. After the funeral, the stage lights dimmed forever in her heart. She had sold her costumes, left the academy, and crossed an ocean to provide for the only family she had left. Since then, her life had been measured in paychecks, shifts, and tips. Every night, she danced only in her mind. But tonight, the music reclaimed her. As the violin moaned and the bandoneon's notes curled through the air, Lucy stepped away from the band, the click of her shoes striking the floor in rhythm. Her body remembered what her heart had tried to forget: the precision, the power, the passion. Every movement was carved from discipline and pain. Every breath an echo of the years she had lost. Gasps spread through the ballroom as the transformation unfolded before them. Gone was the timid waitress. In her place stood a woman shaped by heartbreak and courage. Her shoulders rolled back, her steps flowed like silk, her posture commanding yet graceful. Ethan Cole watched, his smirk fading by the second. He had expected embarrassment. He was watching resurrection. Lucia paused at the edge of the dance floor and turned toward him. For a moment, the music seemed to breathe with her. Her eyes found his, not pleading, not afraid, but challenging. "Are you ready, Mr. Cole?" she asked softly. He hesitated, the arrogance slipping from his expression. The laughter of his friends had died entirely. He rose slowly, drawn in by something he couldn't define. Lucia extended her hand. Her fingers were steady, her gaze unwavering. "Tango," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "is not a game." The crowd leaned forward as he reached for her hand. Somewhere deep inside, Lucaya felt the ghosts of her parents watching. The floor beneath her feet became the stage she had lost, and the music was no longer background noise. It was her heartbeat. And as the first true note of Libertango filled the air, Lucia Alvarez stopped being a waitress. She became what she had always been, a dancer. The opening notes of Libertango sliced through the air like the first breath after drowning. Every sound in the ballroom disappeared beneath its rhythm. Ethan Cole stood still, one hand resting lazily on his champagne glass, his smirk barely holding. He was ready to be entertained. Certain this would end in humiliation. Lucia Alvarez walked toward him with a poise that didn't belong to a servant. The crowd parted instinctively. Each step was deliberate, echoing with quiet power. Her eyes never left his. When she stopped in front of him, the tension could have snapped a wire. Without a word, she reached out and took the glass from his hand. The contact was brief but electric. She set it aside on the nearest table, then looked up at him. Her voice was calm and low, but it carried through the entire room. "Tango requires respect. Mr. Cole, do you have any?" The words cut through the silence sharper than the violin. A murmur swept across the audience. Ethan blinked, momentarily unsure. The arrogance in his posture faltered. He stared down at her, searching for a trace of fear. There was none. Lucia extended her right hand. Her fingers hovered in the air. Patient, steady, unshaking. The music grew deeper, the beat pulsing like a second heartbeat through the floor. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. Then, drawn by something he couldn't name, he placed his hand in hers. The crowd inhaled together. Lucia's grip tightened, elegant but commanding. With her left hand, she guided his to the small of her back, positioning him perfectly. Then she lifted her chin and met his gaze again. "Follow me," she said softly. The first step came like lightning. Lucia's body flowed into motion, precise and alive, pulling him into the rhythm before he had time to resist. Her movements were sharp, graceful, and deliberate, her every gesture carved from years of discipline. Ethan tried to match her, clumsy at first, nearly stumbling, but she steadied him with a single press of her hand, guiding him without words. The crowd was silent now, completely spellbound. The laughter, the arrogance, the champagne, all of it vanished. What remained was the raw connection between two people caught inside a dance neither had expected. Lucia's skirt swept against his leg as she pivoted, the fabric whispering against the polished floor. The air shimmered with heat and tension. Her eyes locked with his, unflinching. Ethan felt his confidence crumble with every beat. He was used to controlling boardrooms and corporations, but not this. Here, on this floor, she was the power. He realized he was being led, not leading. Lucia circled him, her movements commanding and sensual, every step filled with authority. The audience could see it, the reversal. The billionaire followed the waitress. The man who had laughed now obeyed. Her hand pressed lightly against his shoulder, signaling the next turn. He reacted instinctively, trying to anticipate her movements, but she stayed one step ahead, dictating the tempo. The violin screamed, the bandoneon moaned, and their bodies became part of the melody. A bead of sweat rolled down Ethan's temple. His breath grew uneven, but Lucia never faltered. Every time he looked into her eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. Pride, not the pride of wealth, but the pride of dignity, of a woman who refused to be broken. Around them, the world seemed to stop. The chandeliers glimmered. The guests forgot to breathe. The hotel manager stood frozen by the door, eyes wide. Lucia spun under Ethan's arm, their hands connecting again. The audience gasped at the precision, at the control. She led him into a close embrace, her voice barely above a whisper, her lips near his ear. "Now you understand," she said. For a heartbeat, Ethan did. The arrogance dissolved. The humiliation turned to awe. When the music slowed, they remained still in the center of the floor, eyes locked, the crowd suspended in silence. Lucia's breathing was calm, steady, victorious. For the first time in his life, Ethan Cole had been led. The music roared to life, and Lucia Alvarez became the storm it carried. Every note ignited movement. Her body flowed like wind cutting through glass, fierce yet impossibly graceful. Her steps were clean, sharp, and full of fire. Every pivot sent the hem of her black dress swirling, a shadow chasing light. Ethan Cole tried to keep up. At first, his steps faltered, his rhythm clumsy. He was a man used to leading. But here, he was completely at her mercy. Lucia's eyes flicked toward him once. Silent instruction written in every glance. Listen to the music, listen to me. He followed, slowly, almost unwillingly. His movements began to align with hers. The arrogance that had once armored him cracked under the weight of awe. The violin screamed, fierce and haunting. The bandoneon wept, and Lucia moved as if possessed by something divine. Her hand rested lightly in his, her back straight, her gaze locked forward. Her every motion carried the pulse of Argentina itself. She was no longer just a woman in a servant's dress. She was memory, grief, defiance, and beauty wrapped in motion. Around them, no one dared to speak. Crystal glasses stood untouched. The chandeliers above trembled slightly from the vibration of the instruments. People leaned forward in their seats, afraid to blink. They had come expecting entertainment. But what they were witnessing was something raw and unforgettable. A woman reclaiming her soul in front of those who had once ignored it. Ethan's chest tightened. He could feel her strength through every connection of their bodies. The soft press of her palm, the rhythm of her breath, the controlled tension in her frame. She guided him without a word, and he obeyed without question. For the first time, he understood what it meant to follow. Lucia's expression softened for a fleeting second, her eyes glistening under the golden light. For her, this was more than dance. It was resurrection. Every movement carried the ghosts of her parents. Every turn whispered their names. The crowd might have seen elegance, but Lucia felt survival. As the tempo rose, Ethan moved closer, his steps syncing with hers. Their bodies created a language only dancers understood. The rhythm throbbed through the floor, through their feet, through the air itself. Lucia's heartbeat merged with the music, her energy radiating like a pulse through the room. Then came the ascent to the climax. Lucia spun away from Ethan, her skirt blooming like ink in water. The crowd gasped. She turned again, and again, until she landed in his arms perfectly timed with the crash of the piano. The violin climbed higher, aching toward its final note. Ethan caught her, his breath ragged, his hands trembling not from effort, but from reverence. Lucia lifted her eyes to his. For a heartbeat, they stood still, the world suspended between them. Then she moved. With flawless precision, she shifted her weight, signaling him with the faintest press of her palm. He understood. She let her body fall backward. arching into the famous dip that defined the soul of tango. The curve of her spine was poetry, her leg extending in a line of fire beneath the spotlight. Ethan's arm held her firm, strong, unwavering. The final chord struck, the music stopped, and the world went silent. 3 long seconds. Not a cough, not a whisper, just the sound of breathing, shared between 2 people and 100 stunned onlookers. Then the silence shattered. Applause erupted like thunder. People rose from their chairs, clapping, shouting, whistling. The sound rolled through the ballroom in waves. Some guests were on the verge of tears. The orchestra joined in, their instruments resting as their hands clapped for her. Lucia slowly rose from the dip, her hair tumbling over her shoulders, her chest rising with steady breath. Her eyes shimmered, not with pride, but with peace. She bowed her head slightly, acknowledging the storm she had just unleashed. In that moment, every person in the room understood the truth. They had not witnessed a performance. They had witnessed redemption. The applause thundered through the ballroom, rising and falling like waves. People were still standing, some clapping furiously, others too stunned to move. Flashbulbs flickered from the phones that had captured every second of the dance. The once mocking audience was now spellbound, murmuring words like extraordinary and unreal. At the center of it all, Ethan Cole tried to steady his breathing. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. His trademark smile had returned, but it looked fragile now, stretched too tight across his face. He signed with an elegant flourish, as if trying to reclaim the control that had slipped through his fingers. When the pen lifted from the paper, he tore the check free and held it high for all to see. $100,000, he declared, his voice louder than necessary, for the Children's Arts Foundation. The crowd erupted again, grateful to have something to cheer for. Cameras flashed. The foundation director rushed forward, eyes wide with gratitude, shaking his hand and thanking him profusely. Ethan nodded automatically, his gaze fixed on Lucia across the room. She stood near the band, still catching her breath. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair loose around her shoulders, her hands clasped neatly before her. Every inch of her looked like quiet triumph. Ethan took a step toward her. "Miss Alvarez," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "you've impressed me tonight. Completely." The room went silent again. People turned their heads, sensing something was about to happen. Ethan smiled, trying for charm, but landing somewhere closer to discomfort. "How about dinner tomorrow?" he asked. "Just the 2 of us. I'd like to know the woman behind that dance." A collective gasp rolled through the audience. It was the kind of moment society thrived on. Power, pride, and spectacle colliding in real time. Lucia blinked slowly, as if weighing her response. Then she smiled faintly. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Cole." Her voice was steady, calm, unmistakably clear. "But I don't dine with men who need to humiliate others to feel powerful." The words landed like a stone in water. Ripples spread through the silence. Someone near the front let out a soft, "Oh." Ethan's confident expression froze. The color drained slightly from his face. Lucia dipped her head politely, her tone unwavering. "Good evening, everyone." And with that, she turned toward the exit. Every eye followed her as she walked. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. The long corridor of guests parted, giving her space as if instinctively acknowledging that she had earned it. Even the band remained motionless, instruments silent in her wake. Ethan stood alone at the center of the ballroom, the check still clutched in his hand. His smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by something uncertain, something human. He watched Lucia's retreating figure as she disappeared through the open doors, her silhouette framed by the golden light of the hallway. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then applause began again, softer this time. It wasn't for Ethan. It was for her. The hotel manager leaned toward a nearby guest and whispered, "She just made history in this room." Reporters were already typing furiously, phones buzzing with headlines that would sweep the internet before midnight. The tango waitress story had been born. Outside, the night air was cool against Lucia's flushed skin. She exhaled, closing her eyes for a second as the echoes of the music faded from her mind. She hadn't won a contest. She hadn't earned a fortune, but she had won something far rarer. She had won back her dignity. By morning, the world had already seen her dance. The video hit the internet before the orchestra even packed their instruments. Someone from the crowd had caught everything: the humiliation, the defiance, the music, the transformation, within hours. The clip flooded TikTok, YouTube, and every social feed in America. The title was simple but explosive: "The Waitress Who Silenced a Billionaire with a Tango." In less than 12 hours, it had 10 million views. By noon, 50 million. By evening, the name Lucia Alvarez was everywhere. Clips replayed across talk shows and news segments. Commentators called it the most satisfying moment caught on camera this year. Influencers stitched reactions. Analysts discussed class divide. And dance professionals replayed her movements in slow motion, praising the perfection of her form. But the internet didn't just see technique. It saw poetry. It saw resistance. It saw a woman who had refused to bow. The hashtag DR Tango Waitress exploded, trending worldwide for 3 days straight. Under every post, thousands of comments appeared. She didn't just dance. She stood up for every person ever disrespected at work. This woman reminded us what dignity looks like. Forget the billionaire. She's the one with real power. Even major newspapers ran headlines. The New York Herald, "When a Tango Became a Revolution." Online magazines published her story, speculating on her past, her training, her mysterious grace. Some called her the Argentine Phoenix. Meanwhile, at the Biltmore estate, chaos turned into opportunity. Hotel manager Thomas Whitmore walked into his office that morning with his phone buzzing nonstop. The video had been tagged with the hotel's name, and the property's social media pages were blowing up. By the time he sat down, they had gained 10,000 new followers. Within an hour, it was 50,000. Whitmore chuckled, shaking his head. "We couldn't buy publicity this good if we tried," he told his assistant, eyes wide with disbelief. And to think, she almost got fired last night. By midday, reporters camped outside the hotel gates, desperate for a statement. News vans filled the street. Guests checked in just to say they were staying where the tango happened. Inside the staff lounge, the other waiters gathered around Lucia's empty locker. Her uniform hung neatly, untouched. Someone had printed a photo from the video, her mid-dip moment frozen in motion, and taped it to the wall with a handwritten note. "She made us proud." That evening, Lucia sat in her small apartment, the same one she had returned to at dawn after refusing interviews and phone calls. Her phone hadn't stopped vibrating for 16 straight hours. Sponsors wanted to meet her. Talk shows wanted to feature her. Agents were already offering contracts, but Lucia didn't open any of them. She sat on the edge of her bed, the glow of the phone lighting her face. On the screen, millions of strangers were celebrating her, and yet all she felt was stillness. The world was loud, but her heart was quiet. She scrolled through the comments until one caught her eye. It was from an older woman who wrote, "My granddaughter watched you this morning and said she wants to learn tango. You gave her courage." Lucia smiled softly. Her eyes glistened, but she wiped the tears before they could fall. Across the world, people were arguing about her. Was she a hero or just a symbol of luck and timing? But Lucia didn't care. She hadn't danced to make a point. She had danced because someone tried to take her dignity, and she refused to let it happen. For her, that was enough. As the sun set over Charleston, the city lights flickered like camera flashes. Somewhere downtown, a giant billboard displayed her frozen mid-step, the caption reading simply, "Courage has rhythm." The waitress had become a legend. The night air outside the Biltmore estate was heavy with summer heat, thick with the scent of jasmine and wet pavement. The ballroom lights still glowed through the tall windows behind her, but Lucia Alvarez wanted nothing more than silence. She stood by the iron gate, the distant hum of Charleston streets filling the space the applause had left behind. Her body still remembered the rhythm of the tango, yet her mind was quiet now, calm in a way it hadn't been for years. Then she heard footsteps. Miss Alvarez. She turned. Ethan Cole was walking toward her, his jacket draped over one arm, the tie gone, his polished confidence stripped away. The arrogant billionaire who had mocked her hours ago now looked human, almost fragile. "I thought you'd gone," she said softly. "I tried," he replied, but leaving without saying this felt wrong. Lucia said nothing. The night breeze played with her hair. Ethan stopped a few feet away, his voice lower, rougher than before. "I was wrong. Entirely. No one tells me the truth anymore. Not my employees, not my investors, not even my friends. They smile, they flatter, and they take what they can. But you?" He swallowed, his words faltering. "You looked me in the eye and told me exactly who I was." Lucia studied him in the dim streetlight. A man who humiliated a waitress? A man who forgot what respect meant. He said quietly. For a long moment, neither spoke. Cars passed in the distance. The world went on, unaware that two people stood between pride and redemption. Finally, Ethan asked, "How did you end up here, Lucia? From Buenos Aires to serving tables in Charleston?" Lucia hesitated. The question opened something deep. She leaned back against the gate, her voice calm but heavy. "My parents died 3 years ago," she began. "Car accident. I was dancing with the National Academy of Tango then, performing across South America. After the funeral, there was nothing left. My grandmother took in my younger siblings. Miguel is studying engineering now. Sophia's still in school. The medical bills, the tuition. I couldn't stay on stage while they struggled to eat." Ethan's gaze softened. The usual steel in his eyes melted into something else. "So, you gave up your dream to take care of them?" Lucia shook her head. "I didn't give it up. I postponed it. Sometimes life demands that." He nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "You're stronger than anyone I've met in years." Lucia smiled faintly. "No, I'm just someone who got tired of bowing." Silence settled again. For the first time, Ethan didn't try to fill it. He just stood there, the cool wind brushing his face, his expression stripped of everything performative. Finally, he said, "If you'll let me, I want to make amends. I have a foundation for children's arts programs. If you tell me where you're from, I'll fund a dance center there. A real one. Free for kids who can't afford lessons. Maybe it could give them what life took from you." Lucia blinked, caught off guard. "Why?" "Because it's the only apology that might matter," he said. Her throat tightened. For a moment, she saw not the billionaire, but the man beneath the title. Tired and flawed, trying to be better. She nodded slowly. "There's a small community center in my old neighborhood," she said. "They teach kids with secondhand shoes and broken floors. They have heart, but no money." "Then they'll have it," Ethan replied. "I'll send my foundation team in the morning." Lucia's eyes shimmered under the streetlight. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan exhaled, a small, genuine smile crossing his face. "No, thank you. You reminded me what dignity looks like." Lucia looked back at the glowing ballroom, the echoes of music fading in her memory. Maybe we both needed that lesson. They stood in silence. Two people who had collided by chance and walked away changed. 6 months later, the morning sun poured through the tall windows of Casa del Arte, painting the polished wooden floor in golden light. The faint sound of a bandoneon filled the air as a dozen children followed Lucia Alvarez's steps with wide, determined eyes. "Chest up, shoulders proud," she said gently, guiding a little girl's hands into the perfect tango frame. "The music is not just for your feet, it's for your heart." The children giggled, trying again. Lucia clapped her hands to the rhythm, her movements sure and graceful. In that moment, she wasn't just a teacher. She was what she had once dreamed of being, a dancer whose art carried meaning. The center had changed everything. Once a rundown warehouse in her old neighborhood of Buenos Aires, it now shone with fresh paint, mirrors, and the laughter of children. A plaque at the entrance read, "Funded by the Ethan Cole Foundation, for every child who dares to dream." At the far side of the room, Mateo, her younger brother, adjusted the sound system while Sophia, now 16, stood by the door bragging to her friends. "That's my sister," she said proudly, her eyes glowing. "She's the one from the tango video. The world knows her now." Lucia inspired her students, reminding them to dance for themselves. As she reflected, her past and passion reunited joyfully. Lucia's phone buzzed. "Landing in an hour. Ready to teach me the real tango?" wrote Ethan. She smiled and typed, "Meet me at Cafe Los Angeles at 9. Bring real shoes." Music filled the studio as children laughed around her. Life is like tango. Fall, rise, and dance again with dignity and faith. If you believe dignity and courage can change a life, give this story your like, share it with friends, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of strength and redemption.